Hi, I'm John Robert Sutton. I travel the globe searching for the finest ingredients and the hidden gems that have been overlooked by mass distribution. Food that is shared by generations of families, culture, and tradition. I will connect you to the stories behind well-sourced food and the people and places who make it happen. Welcome to Truth in Food. Today, I'm very pleased to have our guest, Marieme, born in Africa. And what I really enjoy over the course of what I do around the world is learning so much about places I relatively know nothing about. And I think our audience, how many people know really what is going on with food and agriculture and entrepreneurism in Africa? So, Marieme, thank you for coming, and talk a little bit about yourself, where you were born, and everything about that area of Africa.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, John, for having me here today. Hello, everyone. My name is Marieme Sane. I grew up all over Africa. I'm originally from Senegal, but had the pleasure and opportunity to live in various countries in Africa, including Madagascar, Gabon, the Congo, Ivory Coast, just some of the beautiful countries and cultures that exist in the continent. And I am a food and product developer. I am passionate about food, natural ingredients, and the whole industry of wellness. And I'm very, very excited to share everything that is related to my culture, how food and agriculture is incredibly important to the continent at this point in time, and to people in general in the natural and wellness space.
And so, growing up in West Africa, how you grew up speaking French as well, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Senegal is a French-speaking country among many, and our food was heavily actually. It was heavily sort of. The French culture and the French food and French tradition was sort of introduced to the African continent, and we enjoy sort of a medley of both, like the French and African cultures.
And in what city did you were born and grow up?
I was born in Dakar, which is the capital of Senegal. And fun fact, it's actually also the most the most advanced point in the continent and the closest point to the United States.
Is Dakar?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And is there is it seafood, meat? What's the general cuisine there?
Yes, the cuisine is heavily based on seafood. We actually used to joke that we had fish every single day for lunch. And as children, eventually we're asking our parents, why can't we just have meat once? So the culture is heavily influenced by seafood, but also rice. Rice cultivation is part of the culture in the southern part of the country, and we are very well known across Africa for our red tomato rice, and other countries called jollof rice.
Interesting, and one of the things that's very unique about Southern cooking in Africa around the Charleston area is the rice, and the farming was brought from West Africa hundreds of years ago. So our Southern traditions of rice, of okra, all come from West Africa.
Yes, they absolutely do. And it was really interesting as I came here and had a lot of friends that happened to be from Charleston and South Carolina, how we could find the similarities between some of the dishes that they knew about and grew up with, and some of the dishes that are still cooked to this day in Senegal.
Wow.
Yes.
Fascinating.
It is very interesting indeed.
Yeah. And when you traveled throughout Africa, explain how different and large really Africa is. I mean, people, the concept of Africa, North Africa, Egypt, Morocco, and Central, and then Southern Africa, South Africa. Explain the vastness of the continent.
Yes. So just to put it a bit in perspective, the continent of Africa could actually, in terms of size, could contain the United States, Europe, China, Russia, and a few additional countries in South America. It's a massively large continent in terms of size. And it has a little bit over 50 countries and like hundreds of cultures to come along with those countries, because the countries will have different ethnic groups within each that have different languages, that actually speak different languages. And in that respect, Senegal is one of the few countries where everyone within the country speaks the same language, which is Wolof. A lot of times in many countries, different ethnic groups have their own separate languages, and then they either speak French and English, which becomes sort of the language that everyone shares. There is a lot of diversity in terms of culture, going from the northern part of the continent, where it's very heavily influenced by the Arabic culture to a certain extent, and also maybe the Northern Europe culture, sort of like the Portuguese and some of those countries that are right above the African continent, within Europe. So you have like the countries like Morocco and Algeria and Egypt, where you have sort of that confluence of culture from the Orient, the Arabic Peninsula and a little bit of Europe. And then they have their own sort of climate, which is slightly colder.
Okay.
So it influences what they eat, how they dress and such. And as you go sort of a little bit down into Western Africa, we're getting closer to the equator. So it's a more it's a warmer region. It gets a little bit more exotic. The foods get a little bit more spicy and very sort of like nutritious. And as you go down, towards the southern part of the continent, like in South Africa, it gets cold again. Mm-hmm. So the way people eat is very different. The diet is heavily based on meat. And I'm not exactly sure why, but I'm guessing because of the colder climates that they sort of sustain a little bit better that way. And going to the sort of island of Madagascar, where the cuisine is slightly more Asian.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
So it's very interesting. There is a lot of diversity across the continent.
Now, you mentioned spicy food.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't think you would equate spice with African food. Talk about that. Where do you get the spiciness from?
Yes. Well, in a country like Senegal, for example, with every dish comes a mix of onion and garlic and sort of spices that are not necessarily just derived from spices, but made from local mixes of, I would say, like some chili peppers and maybe ground seafood. Okay. Like ground fish or ground shrimps, and that makes its own spice complex that then gets added to each dish and makes it very rich in flavor. But also just various varieties of chilies and hot peppers are part of the cuisine.
And any sweet dishes?
Yes. However, sweet. It's interesting because a lot of the sweetness is typically reserved for dessert.
Okay.
And not so much for the main dishes, except in countries like Morocco, where you will have a lot of raisins and some dates that are sort of like added to some of the tagines and some of the sauces and make them a little sweeter.
Great.
Yes.
And describe what a kitchen is like when you go to a restaurant. How would you differentiate a kitchen in Senegal than a Western kitchen?
So in Senegal, you will have kind of like the confluence of the French cultures, as I would say, sort of like impact, and and our own Senegalese culture, which is very unique and different by its own right. So you would have a mix of ingredients like millet, which is a type of grain, kind of like a smaller grain, very high in proteins, very, very delicious also, but sort of cooked in a way that is more analogous to French dishes.
Okay.
In a way.
Sure.
So you will have a lot of very rich and tasty sauces. But sort of in a small plate format, or what I would call nowadays a small bowl almost, where you would have like a base of grains or rice and such, and then very tasty sauces and sort of refreshing vegetables like cucumbers and mangoes and such, like cooling flavors. So you'll go from spicy to cooling to a little bit more refined, I will say, also flavors.
So what's like here in America, a typical kid will always love to get a bowl of macaroni and cheese, or a college student will have top ramen. Is there something similar that a kid will just, a mother can make quick that is local that they'll really like to eat?
Oh, yes. It's very interesting because when I was younger in Senegal, my favorite was it was bread, like French baguette, and Senegalese peanuts.
Oh, wow.
And I love to actually sandwich peanuts inside of bread. You know, it's very interesting, but it's very crunchy.
Yes, yes.
And very creamy if you think about it. So in Senegal, we have very, very good quality peanuts. They're very, very tasty. It's very specific to the country, and I think it has to do with the soil and the climate and such. So everywhere as a street food, like everywhere, essentially, you could get peanuts. It's one of the sort of, staples. Street food staples. And I love to, at 5 p.m., have like my little French baguette, and sometimes with butter or not, and then freshly roasted peanuts from the corner lady.
And was the corner lady, has she been there for multi-generations? And
probably, and I believe she probably is still there.
Wow.
And if not her children. And I think that a lot of the people do it out of tradition and out of love and custom. I don't think that it's necessarily just for the business aspect, but being able to sort of like provide that to the community as their own little like gift to everyone around. And there is a strong culture of street foods that are very, very tasty and very simple. I would tell everyone growing up, like for example, hibiscus tea, which is known as like té de Jamaica, for Jamaicans, or it's also well known in South America. That was juice for us. That's what we had in the fridge every day. So that was apple juice.
Wow.
For example, yes.
Oh, that's an amazing product. It's very unknown here in the U.S., but most places in Mexico have what's called Jamaica, and it's the flower of the hibiscus. It's a hibiscus flower that you boil and strain out, and then add more water and serve it as a Kool-Aid. Yes,
cooling beverage, and it's argued also that it has some properties where it protects you from from sun exposure.
Yes.
So there are definitely some research in the way with about those benefits, but yeah, it's very interesting.
And the tea Jamaica is something that is so important to have for your health.
Yes.
It's one of those natural products out there that you could add sugar or no sugar. Did people add sugar in there, or?
Typically for younger children, a little. But for adults, no. They would, instead of sugar, would actually mix it with mint. With mint leaves that are typically grown in each household.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah. So most people would grow some mint in their garden, in their local garden, and then would mix it with the hibiscus tea, and that's what we had in the fridge.
Now, were you allowed as a child to put sugar on everything, or where your mother didn't allow it, or were your grandmother sneak it in, or how was culturally sugar seen in society?
Actually, sugar was rationed. It was really interesting, but we had the sugar cubes, and you don't find those as much anymore. But I think we're allowed 5 sugar cubes every day, so you could sort of have your 5 sugar cubes and use them however you saw fit. But it would be for breakfast, and then you would typically have milk or something. Or tea or coffee for adults, and typically that would require 3 sugar cubes.
All right.
And then you had your extra 2 that you could use for your tea or something different.
Interesting. And then now yourself and your background and education and your love for African source products. Tell us about your professionalism and where you come from.
Yes, absolutely. So I came to the U.S. For college and studied engineering. And one of my passions was chemistry. Sort of minored in it, and I always like to go to the lab and try different experiments. But I've always been attracted to agriculture and plants and nature and soils, and I believe that came from sort of wandering around my grandfather's small farm on Sundays, typically. And as I went back after working initially out of college for Microsoft in the U.S., I went back to Senegal and worked for Microsoft there. And eventually, upon coming back to the U.S., I was still in contact with some African farmers that I had met through my travels for Microsoft across the continent. Because one of the very interesting things that you will find in countries like Madagascar would be these natural sort of small pharmacies where you could go and show them a skin ailment, for example, that you had, and then they would make a custom sort of like prescription type of a mixture. Something for you to just a balm for you to use on that skin ailment that was incredibly effective.
Interesting.
And I loved that and took advantage of that as much as possible. And along the way, sort of researched it a little bit more, went and met with some of the farmers that made some of the extracts that were infused in the balms that the pharmacy would make. And upon coming back to the U.S., some of them actually contacted me and asked me if I could find them U.S. customers. So it hadn't occurred to me until that time that could be sort of like a way to encourage trade. And I told them I thought I could. So being located in Los Angeles, it being a large sort of like manufacturing hub, I set out to go out and find contract manufacturers and brands of cosmetic and personal care products and sort of like shared the story, that story with them and connected them with some of those farmers. And that started my first business, essentially. So I started sourcing some extracts and essential oils from some of those farmers, and then selling them to contract manufacturers and brands locally. And yeah.
Great. Now, what was on your grandfather's farm?
So he was growing a variety of things, from onions to mangoes to oranges and peanuts. Uh-huh. So he wasn't a farmer. He was actually a headmaster at a school. He was an educator, but loved agriculture and loved being able to grow and share his crop with us. Sort of like so every season there was something that we could look forward to getting. Mm-hmm. So mangoes were for the summer. And then we could have peanuts sort of like year round, and onions were somewhere in May. Mm-hmm. When we'd get the fresh crops, and we'd also get papayas from him.
And yes. Talk about the organic nature of the country. How are the soils? Do
Yes.
you have to bring water in? Do you use fertilizer? What's the state of agriculture?
Yes. Agriculture is by and large organic, just because a lot of the small farmers cannot really afford fertilizer.
Okay.
So they go back to sort of like the more traditional methods of making fertilizers, sometimes by having some animals, having or borrowing sort of like herds from different neighbors, from different villages, having the animals come in and sort of fertilize the land and having a rotation system in that way. So the agriculture is typically organic by default.
Got it.
Because that's the way of the land, and that's what people have done traditionally.
And is it by natural rain, or do you bring water in from a far source?
It's by natural rain.
See, and that's what's a lot of people really don't understand. Being here in California, most of the crops are in a desert, and that water has to be brought in by canal from far away. And that water's dead water. By the time that comes through the canals and water these plants and trees, the oranges and things like that, the sun has already zapped out all the nutrients. So then you have to fertilize. So these areas around the world that you're sourcing from are really the future of good environment, of natural flavors, of natural tastes. And these are things we have to embrace. And I'm sure there's items that you go home and taste so much better than what you get here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I thought I typically did not like carrots until I had carrots again in Senegal as part of the salad. And I had forgotten how much the taste could bloom. And this is just from carrots, which are typically very simple and not something that you typically think about. But yes.
Great. Well, I'm here with Marieme, and welcome to Truth in Food. And we will explore the next items that we would love to learn about that people don't know, such as carrots and cashews and these delicious things. All right, I'm back with Marieme, and she is a plant ingredient expert, born in Africa and living here in the United States. And let's discuss a little bit about the actual ingredients that you're sourcing and bringing to the United States. So let's start off with, I always want people to understand about cashews. And when you buy cashews, you buy ones that are broken, and then you buy ones that are full. And what people have to understand is, why are they so expensive? There is no machine out there that actually pulls the membrane off of that seed. So every single cashew you eat, somebody did that by hand. Somebody touched that cashew by hand to get the membrane out to put it in a bag. So you have to understand why that is so expensive, and explain that a cashew's a fruit.
Yes, actually, it's a very interesting fruit. So you have the cashew, which is a fruit. It's sort of sweet and tart, and with a very soft flesh. And then the actual nut is part of the seed. So the cashew is actually a seed. It's very, very interesting. So the seed you sort of like separate from the rest of the fruit, and it gets roasted. And after the roasting process, it has to be broken, and then there is a thin membrane, this sort of pinkish on top of it, that has to be peeled off.
Yes.
And that is a completely manual process. There has been a lot of attempts to sort of make it a little bit more automated, but it doesn't work. And I actually am familiar with a cooperative in the southern part of Senegal that is working with local women to help them sort of like to help them, I would say, make the cashews, and also make it commercialize it a little bit easier.
Great. And part of my company, Sutton Selects, is I travel around the world and really look for opportunities for local women and local cooperatives and sell direct. So most of that money goes to empower women's lives, to be able to send their children to college and certain things. And I think you have a story about your grandmother and how one was able to go to college.
Yes, absolutely. So my grandmother was early on, at a younger age, a widow, and she had already several children, and decided that she needed to work. And what she did was she grew rice. So she became a farmer, and because of that business, and she had more money, then my father got to go to school. He got to be educated because he didn't need to, because she had a little bit more money, so he didn't need to help her on a daily basis. So he went to school, and as a result, I also was educated and went to college here in the U.S. and so on. However, some of my cousins who are, coming from some of my grandma's sisters who didn't have the additional small, that small differential in income, didn't get to go to school.
Yes.
So it's incredible how much having a little bit more income can completely change the life of families, the life of the women and their children and the opportunities that they have. And that is the reason why I'm so passionate about working with cooperatives and women.
And that's why I am here. My core being is here. Truth in Food is here, because I have seen enough around the world where that little difference can create amazing individuals such as yourself. And I'm here to embrace that. I'm here to sell. I'm here to educate. And one of these companies that I really want to educate is Crafts Food. Crafts Food is losing billions of dollars because they haven't really tapped in to concepts and companies such as yourself. So let's talk about what you have created and what is the name of your company and what is in these wonderful little cartons.
Yes, absolutely. So the name of my company is Yummy Society.
The Yummy Society?
Yes.
I love that name. The Yummy Society.
Thank you. And our tagline is Eat Well and Treat Society Well, which are two concepts that are incredibly important to me. So with each product, we choose ingredients that are sort of whole foods and that are full of nutrients. And we actually have cashews that are in a lot of our products that are coming from some of the women cooperatives, as well as oats and our focus is actually the breakfast foods sort of sector, because we want to make it as convenient and easy as possible for people to eat wholesome, delicious breakfast. And going from our packaging that is incredibly portable, it closes shut. You can just grab it and put it in your in your sort of purse or your bag, or even have it fit in your container, so in your cup container in your car. It is an incredible option for people who are busy but yet are determined to eat as well as possible.
And I mean, I've been to over 60 countries sourcing and buying and come up and seen so many things. I have never seen pecan, pumpkin, granola. This sounds delicious. Talk about the pumpkin in here.
Thank you. The pumpkin is actually sourced from Mexico. So we love as much as possible to get as close as possible to the source. And these are sort of like delicious nuts that have great properties and are full of nutrients that more people really need to eat and have be a part of their diet. So we are very specific about the ingredients that we choose to ensure that they are they participate essentially to the individual's health. And we don't have any additives or ingredients that are just present to change the flavor, to change the texture or such. Every single ingredient in the product contributes to making the individual that is consuming it healthier.
And again, these are the type of products that major food corporations are overlooking out there. I know it, I live it, and these brands are the future of health because they are sourced so intelligently. And Marieme, you also are a chemist, correct?
Yes. I specialize in product development for natural products. I sort of like create formulas from the variety of natural ingredients I've had the opportunity to work with to make products that are more wholesome, that are just as effective, but sort of like do not come with all of the chemicals and additives that a lot of times nowadays we're realizing are not necessary.
Yes, and so many of those chemicals and additives essentially are corporations that are locked into other companies that insist on using them. But with modern technology, we don't need to use a lot of that today.
No, we don't.
So also we have some very interesting oils. Talk about these.
Yes, so this is the plant laboratory, and we are working on using some really interesting oils that are sourced from all over the world that are specifically geared towards nourishing the skin, which is an organ which we need to, provide nutrients to in the same manner that we do with our food. So our focus is to nourish the skin, to have as much nutrients and as possible to within these products to create a difference for individuals, and also a positioning within the anti-aging sort of like sector.
And you brought up something very interesting. I mean, you look at companies that have to look toward the future, and no one really saw food as medicine.
Absolutely.
And I would task Kraft to say, listen, you need to look at food as medicine and to have another division that focuses on this. And it's now known that people with Alzheimer's, one of the reasons is their skin is dry as you age, and it's not getting the moisture, and it's sucking your brain fluid to go into your skin. So if your skin, if you're older, is completely nourished and completely hydrated, it stops your brain from being shrinking.
Absolutely.
And these are the products that you have developed to do that. And it's very important that these are not chemicals. This isn't somebody in a laboratory coming up with Frankenstein type things that are poisoning your body. These are using plants and food to basically make you feel good and do good and be good.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. And actually, a lot of the ingredients inside of our beauty products are food grade. So,
wow. So what is food grade? What does that mean, food grade?
Food grade would mean that the same oil that you would use, let's say if it were a coconut oil, so the same oil that you would use to cook your chicken or to bake a cake would be the oil that you would also apply on your body.
Interesting.
Yes.
Wow. So this is stuff that is completely environmental as well. We're not taking and creating chemicals, and then if we're putting them on our body, it's good for everything.
Yes, absolutely, because a lot of times the body doesn't know how to process certain chemical ingredients, so it just stores them within our fat, and it stays there. So it doesn't even leave our body. It sort of like stays there and contributes towards poisoning us. So so our goal is to make food and cosmetic products that nourish our skin and improve our lives.
And so Marieme here has developed these products, and what I like to do, and some of my mission is to seek out these people around the world and basically explain that these products need to be in the marketplace. And Marieme is actually looking for a company such as Kraft or a hedge fund or an investor to come in and invest with the future of these products. And as an investor, as an advisor to a merchant bank, these are the type of things that once understood with a very educated individual that could add billions of dollars to shareholders if that need be, and also provide tremendous health benefits for the population. So you're also basically causing the future to have less medical and hospitalization because of these products. So what exactly are you looking for from a distribution, from an investor standpoint? I'm sure somebody out there is listening to this and should key in onto your expertise and these products.
Yes, absolutely. So we are currently looking for funding as well as partnerships with companies that already have an established distribution channel, because our goal is to sort of like share these products with consumers as efficiently and as efficiently as possible. So, and in order to do that, we have to be able to come into the marketplace and have the ability to educate the consumers and expose them to our products.
Got it. And how would people be able to contact you? If somebody out there today needs to get a hold of you, how do they do it?
They could go to our website, www.theplantlaboratory.com, and also follow us on social media at Yummy Society and at The Plant Laboratory.
God, I love that name, Yummy Society. Thank you so much for coming in, Marieme. And I would like to thank you for joining me today on Truth in Food. I'm John Robert Sutton. For more information about this program, visit my website at suttonselects.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the opportunity.